How do you know who you are? Is it what your parents tell you in the earliest stages of your development? Is it what you learn about yourself while struggling through with the painful grip of puberty? Or worse, what the other kids tell you? Who decides? God, I hope it's not my boss. I realize it may refer to how we are brought up, or where and in what circumstances we are born, or what may have been the values of our ancestors. What are my roots? Taking the word roots at a literal definition, I would say I don't have any. Or perhaps a better phrase would be, I have yet to make any. If I had to draw you a picture of what mine might look like, I'd say it'd look like the flying spaghetti monster, with floating around with his noodly appendages flailing. Around 1979, two 18-year-olds met at the naval base in San Diego and fell in love. They spent a lot of time partying, being foolish and young. During this time, my mother was introduced to drugs by my father, and by the age of 20, they were expecting a baby, me. Despite this news, my parents continued to party hard. My mom was hopped up on Quaaludes and marijuana for the majority of her pregnancy. This is where my story begins. 1980s doctors thought it was okay to leave a full-term baby in 6 weeks past the due date. Yeah. Because I was so late, some of my body parts were a little swollen. The doctors explained it this way. The body wants something to do, like grow. Well, things kept growing to the point my dad thought I was a boy. Thankfully, it was just some swollen undercarriage. Declarations were made about who I would be the week I was born. I didn't get much of a say. What did the doctors tell my parents? Well, I'd either be a beanpole or seriously curvy. I might be covered in a ridiculous amount of hair or completely bald. If you hear my mother tell the story of my birth, you'd think she was delivering at the San Diego Zoo and not Balboa Naval Hospital. Although I should probably question some of that, given how close they are in proximity. She actually questioned where the purple baby monkey came from. And the last thing the doctors mentioned was that it was very likely that I would be homosexual. Well, fine. I hate to disappoint. How did this decree impact me growing up? This wasn't a story my mother shared with me until I was a teen. I do recall some points in my life where this information would have come in handy. This pronouncement about my sexual orientation would have been useful knowledge. Not only that, the drug abuse theme remained in play, and for a long time, I had no idea how that would factor in. These were key pieces in my self-identification, things I consider to be central to my growth and development. These seemingly trivial fragments have shaped a lot of my choices. Roots can also be defined as to become firmly established or settled. Unrooted. Having just completed my 65th move in my 36 years of being, this notion seems strongly supported. Exhibit A, anyone? Add to that 13 schools in 13 years. The last 6 of those years were between 2 schools. At the age of 14, I moved out of my mother's house, bouncing around on floors and couches. At least 6 people took me in. My mom, who is now on her 4th marriage, was bringing home different guys, or taking me to bars to hang out. I think I spent more time in a bar than I did on a playground. If I wasn't at the bar with her, she wasn't really around. I'm sensing a pattern here. There was no consistency. There were no rules. The whims of an addict were shaping me, and I had no choice but to let them. Uprooted. When I was 4, my parents divorced. The circumstances are irrelevant, but their inability to see past the drama superseded my needs as a child. Since then, I have quarreled with who I was, and what that meant and how people perceived me, or what it would mean in terms of my potential. Looking back, there were numerous incidents involving girls and discovery, even at such a young age. Don't get me wrong, there were boys too. I was looking to answer those questions about myself. I'm still looking, thinking about my roots. Having moved schools and houses so often, I never really had a chance to make connections with those kids. This aided in my inability to be social. I was definitely the awkward kid who sat alone at the cafeteria, and truthfully, I didn't mind a damn bit. At any one given time, I had maybe one friend. Not connecting with those kids meant I didn't have to say goodbye to them. My mom was closer to the children in those neighborhoods than I was. Most of the time, they would come over and ask if she could play. In middle school, I was the poor kid. Since my mom blew most of our money on drugs, I rarely had food or clean clothes. I got made fun of a lot. Some kids would call me crusty baritone because I couldn't afford my own band instrument and ended up with one of the ridiculously shitty horns that belonged to the school. I didn't mind. I still thought it was the most beautiful thing on the planet. But their words, day in and day out, eventually it wore me down a bit. I started writing really dark poetry, if the musings of a 12-year-old could be called poetry. More like depressive journaling. I wasn't out of the closet in middle school, and at this point, I still didn't know the story of my birth. I think I was one of those unfortunate cases where everyone decides who you are before you come to terms with it. As with most young adults, life was confusing as fuck. Most days, I didn't know what I was going to eat or if I'd be able to shower. Some days, I didn't even know where I'd be sleeping. Like a tornado, the winds of change were constantly throwing me a curveball, and sometimes an entire baseball diamond. Then came high school. I'd like to think we all dread starting freshman year, being back at the bottom of the barrel, but for me, it was the same. I was never quite able to swim to the top. I didn't want to be there anyway. Have you ever met an ASB kid? These children are wielding power like their fucking lives depend on it. Are there scholarships for being a douchebag? Or for being a malnourished, oversexed cheerleader? Is this what people with opportunity and privilege do? Is this what I should be striving to achieve? Fuck. How can I possibly be a successful adult if I can't get into water polo, cheer, or become class president? Why does no one tell you that shit won't matter? Toward the end of high school, I was invited to try meth by one of the people I was staying with. Since it was a drug dealer's house, and it was free, and I was reveling in my teenage angst, I figured why not? Since this was so thematic in my life, I thought maybe I was missing out on something. This made my mother very happy. I wish that was a joke. Now we had something in common. Now she wanted to spend time together. To teach me how to party. I already had drinking down pat, and I wanted desperately to connect with her. She'd bring home these rocks, chunks of crystal, stuffed in her bra. Huge fucking rocks. Where is all this coming from? Don't ask questions. Enjoy this quality time with your mom. Live life to the fullest. Or whatever the hell people say. From roughly 17 to 23, I experienced the life of a tweaker as a tweaker. Not just from the sidelines anymore. A few people tried to intervene, but it all fell on deaf ears. I mean, for fuck's sake, I'm busy connecting with my parent, people. What more do you want from me? Now I need to listen to your concerns about the bags under my eyes and the obscene weight loss, which I thought I needed anyway? This is my opportunity to find ground, and maybe even start to take root. At least, that's how I saw it. We're all human, right? Self-worth. I think this is something we all struggle with. I do not have the most positive outlook on my appearance or the strongest conviction in my abilities. I've never questioned if my family thought I was worth a damn because they made it pretty apparent they didn't. We're all human, right? None of us wants to be lonely. There were times when I found myself wanting to fit in, even a little. Not because I wanted to connect with people, but because I wanted to feel less alone in being alone. Do the struggles we all share as a species qualify as roots individually? Maybe my roots are different, more far-reaching and noodly. As a Hispanic lesbian, people have loads to say about what they see in me. what they think they see in me. I still don't know who I see me as, what my life's journey has meant in terms of my origins. The 65th move really stirred this up. In working through this, I realized that after my job and marriage, the longest place I stayed was the womb. My life has been a series of erraticism, continuous uprooting, constant change. No one was tending to those roots when I was young. No one taught me to garden, to tend to them myself. As families gather around for the holidays, I'm still questioning, what are my roots? Am I just some lesbian with borrowed ideals and stolen traditions? Am I the small percentage of people who make it out of starvation and borderline homelessness and addiction? Do I get to decide what my roots are? What they make me? Who they make me? Better yet, do I care what you think about these experiences? Probably more than I care to admit. Maybe that makes me just like everyone else. I'm too concerned with the public's perception to ground myself in the dreams I ignore and hiding my talents and passions from the world for fear they will be taken from me, or worse, mocked. I guess all that questioning leaves me rooted in humanity.